I never believed betrayal would come quietly. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just a calm voice, standing in the living room I'd lived in for nearly 4 decades, telling me my life was no longer mine. My wife and I sold the house, my son said. We need the money. You have until tomorrow to pack. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. The words didn't land all at once. They drifted through the room slowly, like smoke, settling into corners of my mind that refused to accept them. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for him to laugh and tell me this was some cruel joke. But he didn't smile. And that's when I knew this was real. I had lived in that house on Maple Street for 37 years. I had carried groceries through its front door while pregnant. I had watched my husband fix the porch railing with hands that shook from arthritis but never from fear. I had memorized the sound of every step on the staircase, every drafty window, every place the floor creaked in winter. It wasn't just a house. It was my life. After my husband passed away 5 years earlier, the house became quieter, but it was still mine. Too big, people said. Too much work. But it held memories I wasn't ready to bury along with him. My son, Brian, had never complained before. Not openly. He was successful, at least on the surface. Financial consultant. Clean suits. Confident posture. Married to Tiffany, a real estate agent with a flawless smile and eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. We weren't close, but we weren't distant either. Monthly dinners. Polite conversations. Holiday calls. The kind of relationship adult children often have when life pulls them elsewhere. Then, about 6 months earlier, something changed. It started with questions. Mom, have you ever thought about downsizing? This place must cost a fortune to maintain. Wouldn't an apartment be safer for you? At first, I brushed it off. I laughed. Changed the subject. Asked about their work. About their lives. But the questions kept coming. And then the visits started. Unannounced. Unexpected. Tiffany would walk through my kitchen, opening cabinets like she was inspecting a property listing. She'd comment on the outdated appliances, the heating system, the property taxes. Brian would nod along, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the walls like they were already imagining new owners. They called it concern. I felt like inventory. You're alone here, Tiffany would say softly. What if something happened? I was 68, not helpless. I drove myself. I volunteered. I gardened. I paid my bills on time. Yet they spoke to me like I was already fading. The phone calls became more frequent. Brian would call late at night, asking about my will, my medical preferences, whether I had considered assisted living. It felt less like love and more like preparation. Then came the day everything shattered. It was an October afternoon. I was trimming roses when Brian's car pulled into the driveway. He came alone. The look on his face told me something was wrong. Not worry. Not fear. Finality. He didn't wait to be invited inside. He walked past me and stood in the living room like he owned it. We need to talk, he said. And then he dropped the words that split my world in half. I sold your house. The sale closes tomorrow. I grabbed the back of my husband's old armchair to keep from falling. You, what? We needed the money, he said, irritation creeping into his voice. Tiffany and I have an anniversary trip planned. It's expensive. And honestly, you don't need a house like this anymore. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. You sold my home without asking me? He sighed like I was being unreasonable. We already arranged a place for you. Assisted living. 1 bedroom. Everything included. You'll be safer there. Safer. That word again. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me. This wasn't the boy I raised. This was someone else. But here's what he didn't know. What he couldn't possibly know in his confidence and greed. The house was no longer in my name. So I smiled. A small, quiet smile that confused him. Is that so? I said calmly. Then you'd better tell me where you're sending me. When he left, I didn't cry. I sat in the same chair for 20 minutes, letting the shock wash over me. Then I stood up and opened my laptop. Because panic wouldn't save me. Knowledge would. What I discovered that evening changed everything, and revealed just how far my son was willing to go. Brian believed he had already won. He thought the house was his. He thought I was powerless. What he didn't know was that by trying to steal my home, he had just triggered a chain of events that would destroy everything he built. And the next move was mine. When my son drove away that afternoon, he left behind more than silence. He left behind certainty. Brian believed I would panic. That I would pack my belongings, cry myself to sleep, and accept whatever future he had chosen for me. He believed I would be too confused, too frightened, too old to fight back. And for a brief moment, just a moment, fear tried to take hold. My hands shook as I sat in the living room. The walls felt closer than they ever had. I kept replaying his words in my head, as if repetition might make them make sense. Sold the house. 1 day to pack. Assisted living. I had trusted him. Not blindly, perhaps, but enough to never imagine this level of betrayal. Still, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: running would only make it easier for them to finish what they started. So instead, I stayed. That night, I didn't sleep. I researched. I pulled property records. I made phone calls. I waited on hold. I spoke politely to clerks who had no idea they were holding my sanity together with routine answers. And finally, just before midnight, the truth surfaced. The house wasn't legally mine anymore. It belonged to the trust my husband and I had created years earlier, on our attorney's advice, after his health began to decline. A living trust. My name listed as the sole trustee. Brian listed as beneficiary after my death. Meaning one thing, and one thing only. Brian could not sell the house. Not without my permission. Not without my signature. Not without committing fraud. I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So how had he done it? Had he lied to a buyer? Forged paperwork? Or was this entire thing a bluff, designed to scare me into signing everything over? I needed answers. And answers don't come from fear. They come from patience. The performance begins. The next morning, I did something that surprised even myself. I didn't confront him. I didn't call screaming. I didn't threaten lawyers. I didn't accuse him of anything. Instead, I played the role he expected. I texted him one sentence. I'm trying to understand everything. Please send me the address of the facility. The reply came within minutes. Relief practically poured through the screen. Sunset Gardens. It's really nice, Mom. You'll like it. You'll like it. As if my life were a hotel booking. From that moment on, I became exactly who they thought I was. Confused, overwhelmed, passive. And while they relaxed, I watched. What they didn't know, Brian had always underestimated me. He assumed I didn't understand technology, that I didn't use social media, that I didn't pay attention. That assumption would be his undoing. I started with something simple. Facebook. Tiffany's profile was public, carefully curated, filled with luxury brands, motivational quotes, and beach photos that screamed success. Scrolling back through her posts, a pattern emerged. Countdowns, resort brochures, hashtags about dream trips and manifesting abundance. They hadn't just planned a vacation. They had built an image around it. And images require funding. That's when I made the call. Brian's colleague, Robert Chin. I had met him at holiday parties. A polite man. Respectful. The kind who still called me Mrs. Sanderson. When he answered, I kept my voice calm. Robert, I need to ask you something personal. And I need honesty. There was a pause. Then a sigh. Brian took out a loan last month, he said quietly. A big one. He said it was for an investment, but people are concerned. How big? I asked. 6 figures. My stomach dropped. Robert hesitated, then added, he's been distracted. Missed deadlines. A major client almost walked. I thanked him and hung up. The picture was coming together. Debt. Pressure. Desperation. And desperation makes people dangerous. Calling the right person. That afternoon, I made the call I had hoped never to make. Sarah Morrison. My late husband's law school friend. Estate attorney. Known for being relentless when family members tried to exploit the elderly. When she answered, I didn't soften the truth. My son tried to sell my house. There was silence. Then, very calmly, tell me everything. She arrived the next morning at 9 sharp, carrying a leather briefcase and a look that told me this was no longer just family drama. This was war. She listened. Took notes. Asked precise questions. When I finished, she leaned back. He can't sell the house, she said. Which means he's either bluffing or he's committed fraud. My phone buzzed. A message from Brian. Have you started packing? Movers arrive at 3. Sarah looked at the screen and smiled, not kindly. Let's see what happens at 3. The movers. At 2:47 p.m., a white truck pulled up. 2 men stepped out, clipboards in hand. My heart pounded. Sarah stood beside me, phone recording. Do not open the door, she said. The knock came. Mrs. Sanderson? We're here for your relocation. Sarah opened the door. I'm her attorney, she said. And this move is unauthorized. The men exchanged confused looks. But her son has no legal authority. She handed them their paperwork back. You've been misled. The truck drove away. Minutes later, Brian arrived. This time, Tiffany was with him. Their confidence vanished the moment they saw Sarah. This is ridiculous, Brian snapped. Mom, what is this? This, Sarah said coldly, is the consequence of your actions. Tiffany tried concern. We're just worried about her safety. I stepped forward. You hired movers without telling me, I said calmly. You told them I agreed to leave. You lied. Brian's face hardened. I'm your son. Everything you have will be mine anyway. And there it was. The truth. Masks fall. I told him what I knew. About the loan. About the vacation. About the debt. Tiffany snapped. If you weren't so stubborn, we wouldn't have had to do this. Sarah stepped between us. You attempted elder fraud, she said. And I have documentation. Fear flickered across Brian's face. Good. They left that day shaken. But not defeated. The pressure campaign. The next phase was emotional warfare. Emails from Tiffany. I've been crying for days. We just want to take care of you. Flowers from Brian. I'm sorry, Mom. Please call me. Voicemails. Angry. Tearful. Manipulative. I documented everything. Every message. Every attempt. Then came the isolation tactic. You're choosing lawyers over family. You'll regret this when you're alone. They were wrong. I wasn't alone. My book club rallied around me. Friends checked in daily. A support group shared stories identical to mine. I wasn't paranoid. I was being targeted. And then they escalated. 3 weeks later, they returned. This time, they brought someone with them. A doctor. A specialist. She introduced herself politely. I'm here to assess your living situation. They were trying to declare me incompetent. Right there in my garden. I refused the assessment. The doctor subtly reframed my resistance as paranoia. Classic. I pulled out my phone. Would you like to see evidence instead? Her smile faltered. Brian exploded. We needed help. And you're hoarding money while we drown. I told them to leave. They did. Threatening guardianship as they walked away. They thought bringing a doctor would break me. They thought fear would make me fold. Instead, it gave me exactly what I needed. Because 2 weeks later, I received official court papers. My own son was trying to take legal control of my life. And the courtroom would decide whether I was free, or whether everything I owned, including myself, would belong to him. The envelope arrived without warning. No knock. No phone call. No courtesy. Just a thick, cream-colored packet sitting in my mailbox like a verdict already decided. I knew what it was before I opened it. People don't file emergency guardianship petitions quietly. They file them when they believe fear, authority, and speed will overwhelm resistance. Brian was no longer trying to move me. He was trying to erase me. I carried the envelope inside and placed it carefully on the kitchen table, the same table where I had taught him how to do homework, where we had shared birthday cakes and late-night conversations about his future. Now it held papers declaring I was no longer fit to control my own life. Sarah arrived an hour later. She read the documents slowly, her jaw tightening with each page. He's claiming you're mentally incompetent, she said finally. That you're paranoid, unsafe, and incapable of managing your finances. I nodded. I expected this. She looked up sharply. You did? They brought a doctor, I said. They tested the waters. Sarah exhaled through her nose. Then this was always the plan. The house was just the bait. The strategy. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. 7 days. That's how long Brian thought it would take to break me. Emergency guardianship cases move fast by design. The court assumes urgency, danger, decline. And in that short window, adult children can do a lot of damage. But Sarah was prepared. "We don't just defend," she said. "We overwhelm." She built the case like a fortress. Medical records from my primary physician showing normal cognitive function. Financial statements showing decades of responsible money management. Letters from the library where I volunteered. Affidavits from my book club. Security footage from the day Brian brought the movers. Documentation from the moving company itself. And then there was the money trail. The loan. The debt. The resort payment. Motives matter in court. And Brian's motives were about to be exposed under fluorescent lights. The night before, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of losing, but because I was grieving. The night before the hearing, I sat in my husband's old chair and looked at a photograph of Brian as a child. Missing tooth. Grass-stained knees. A smile that used to be effortless. Somewhere along the way, that boy learned to see people as resources. And tomorrow, I would have to sit across from him while he told a judge I no longer knew my own reality. Sarah called late. "They're bringing witnesses," she warned. "Including the doctor." "I'm ready," I said. And I meant it. The courtroom. The courtroom smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Brian sat on the opposite side, wearing his best suit. Tiffany beside him, eyes already glossy, clutching tissues like props prepared in advance. Their attorney, young, sharper than before, whispered strategy in Brian's ear. When the judge entered, the room stood. Judge Patricia Carmichael. Sharp eyes. No patience for theatrics. She opened the file, scanned it once, then looked up. "Let's proceed." Their story. Brian's attorney spoke first. He painted a picture of a loving son desperate to protect his declining mother. "She's isolated," he said. "She refuses help. She believes her family is plotting against her." The words were smooth, rehearsed. Then the doctor took the stand. She described my calm refusal as suspicion, my documentation as obsession, my boundaries as paranoia. She spoke gently, as if that made the lies kinder. Then came the witnesses. A colleague of Brian's who described him as devoted. A relative of Tiffany's who said I had changed recently. Every sentence framed me as a tragedy. And then Brian himself stood. His voice trembled at the right moments. "I just want my mom safe," he said. "I made mistakes, but they came from love." He admitted to hiring movers, called it a lapse in judgment. No mention of the vacation. No mention of debt. No mention of money. Not yet. Our turn. Sarah stood. The room shifted. "Mr. Sanderson," she said calmly, "you testified that your actions were motivated by concern for your mother's safety." "Yes." "Then why did those actions coincide with a $47,000 payment to a luxury resort?" Silence. Brian blinked. Sarah handed evidence to the clerk. Credit card statements. Booking confirmations. Social media posts, recent ones. "Your Honor," Sarah said, "this guardianship petition is not about care. It's about control. About accessing assets." Brian stammered. Tiffany looked panicked. Then Sarah called me to the stand. My voice. I spoke slowly. Clearly. I described my routine, my volunteering, my finances, my friendships. I presented medical records. I explained the trust. I explained the attempted move. And finally, Sarah asked the question that mattered most. Why do you believe your son filed this petition? I looked at Brian. Because I refused to give him my house. The judge leaned forward. The decision. After a short recess, Judge Carmichael returned. Her expression was unreadable. I find no evidence of cognitive decline, she said. This petition is denied. She looked directly at Brian. This court does not tolerate the misuse of guardianship as a financial tool. She ordered him to pay my legal fees and referred the case to Adult Protective Services. Brian's face collapsed. Tiffany cried openly. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. Aftermath begins. The investigation moved fast. APS reviewed everything. Within weeks, Brian's employer was notified. So was Tiffany's brokerage. Consequences ripple outward. And this was only the beginning. I thought the courtroom victory was the end. I was wrong. Because what happened next didn't come from the judge. It came from the world Brian had built on lies. And one by one, every pillar holding up his life began to fall. Winning in court didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm, everything still intact, but changed forever. The house was mine. My freedom was mine. But something fundamental had shattered, and no ruling could restore it. Still, life has a way of moving forward whether we're ready or not. And in the weeks that followed the hearing, it moved fast. The investigation. Adult Protective Services didn't waste time. A caseworker named Linda arrived one afternoon with a notepad and a calm, professional demeanor. She reviewed the footage, the emails, the bank records, the court transcript. She didn't ask emotional questions. She asked factual ones. How long had your son been discussing selling the home? Did he ever request power of attorney? Did you feel pressured or intimidated? When she finished, she closed her folder. What your son attempted qualifies as financial exploitation, she said plainly. I felt something settle inside my chest, not anger, not joy, but clarity. This case will be forwarded, she continued, including to his employer. That surprised me. His employer? When someone in a fiduciary role shows willingness to exploit a vulnerable person, even a family member, it raises professional concerns. The dominoes had begun to fall. The collapse. Brian was placed on administrative leave within days. An internal review followed. They examined his loan application, his misleading statements, his attempt to access my assets. The decision came swiftly. Termination. For cause. No severance. Tiffany's world unraveled next. Her real estate brokerage quietly severed ties. Not publicly, not dramatically, but decisively. In that industry, trust is currency. And whispers spread faster than facts. Their long-awaited vacation never happened. The resort kept their money. $47,000 vanished into a contract they could no longer afford. And then came the foreclosure notice. Their townhouse, once a symbol of success, was repossessed after missed payments. They moved into a small rental across town. The life they built to impress others collapsed under its own weight. The letter. 3 months later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Handwritten. Brian's handwriting. I waited 2 days before opening it. The letter wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was exhausted. "We lost everything," he wrote. "Jobs. House. Friends. I never meant to hurt you. I was desperate." He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask forgiveness. He just wanted to be heard. I folded the letter and placed it with the rest of the documentation. Some apologies come too late to change anything. The offer. Sarah called me that evening. "They want to settle," she said. Brian's attorney proposed an agreement. He would relinquish all future claims to my estate, agree not to contest my will, and accept supervised contact only if I agreed not to pursue further legal action. I thought for a long moment. Then I added one condition. "He needs financial counseling," I said. "Proof of completion. Not mercy. Prevention." The agreement was signed 2 weeks later. The final decision. I updated my will. The house would not go to Brian. It would be sold upon my passing, and the proceeds would fund legal aid for seniors facing financial exploitation by family members. If my pain could prevent someone else's, then it would mean something. I framed the foundation papers and hung them beside a photo of my husband. He would have understood. Life after. Life became quieter, but fuller. I renovated the house on my terms. Hosted gatherings. Expanded my volunteer work. I spoke openly about what had happened. And people listened. Because my story wasn't rare. It was familiar. Too familiar. One last message. 6 months later, another letter arrived. Short. Bitter. "You chose a house over your son." I didn't reply. Some people never understand that boundaries are not punishments. They are protections. Freedom. 1 year after everything began, I hosted a garden party. Friends filled the yard. Laughter echoed through rooms that once felt heavy with fear. Someone asked if I regretted my choices. I looked around at the life I had rebuilt. "No," I said. "Not for a second." If someone you love tries to control you for your own good, ask yourself this. Who benefits? Love doesn't steal. Concern doesn't threaten. Family doesn't erase you. If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, no matter your age, your voice still matters.